Hey everybody, welcome back to the Brand Design Masters podcast. I'm your host, Philip VanDusen, and today I am super excited because I am here with Stephanie Carter of The Verse Media. Stephanie's the founder of The Verse Media. She was formerly a general partner of the growth equity firm ABS Partners and is the wife of the former Secretary of Defense under President Obama, Ash Carter. At ABS, Stephanie was responsible for raising $1.6 billion for the firm's funds, creating its investor relations function, and leading all marketing, event, and investment research activities. In support of the Department of Defense, she advocated for military families and veterans and was awarded the Distinguished Public Service Award by the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 2017. And with that, I welcome Stephanie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, amazing background. And for my listeners who are mostly creative entrepreneurs and creative professionals, I want to just kind of posit your appearance because you've had an incredible background in private equity, but you've made this pivot in the last couple of years to a brand new brand. And that is going to be the majority of the focus of our conversation today, because I think it's going to be very instructional for our audience. So why don't you give just a kind of broad brushstroke to the bio around your past, just to put us in context of the Verse as we go forward.
When I was working at ABS Capital, I was in effect content curating, content producing, and brand producing for the firm. You have very little ways to distinguish yourself because every other firm has money and says they'll be your partner for growth. And so, we had to really bring that to life. And so I think it's a hugely important part of that world, but that did make me understand that what I really loved was creating things, curating things, and doing writing, and sort of also I had a big team that I was coaching, and I loved that as well. And I was sort of hitting my head on the ceiling. I had risen up to one of the most senior partners and pretty much had my run of the place, and so no complaints there, but there just wasn't anywhere else to go. And I think people don't really get told that when you're doing all this striving, right, to get to the top of the mountain, that you might actually get there and there might not be another mountain. And so you've got to kind of think about what you want to do. And for me, I'm not a sit around and sort of collect a check girl, but, I just felt like I wanted to start something new. And as you know, because you were along for the ride, as I started thinking about what I might do, I thought I was going to go into sports or entertainment, two fields that I love, and sort of do some of the same things. But it really made me think that when I met with people, and I had a great network and I was able to get in front of a lot of really good people, they had no idea what to do with a 50-year-old experienced executive. And that was kind of a light bulb moment for me. And I just said, wow, there's just really no one out here talking to people that are now realizing real time that they may have another career, another couple careers left in them, and that this stretch of their life is going to be different than how their parents lived it. And that led me to the Verse.
So you found yourself in this particular position and realized, hey, there must be a lot of other people feeling what I'm feeling, this pivot point in your career. And so you decided to essentially create a brand around that for those people. And so your initial thoughts about the Verse, what were you thinking that you were going to be, and these, I guess, was it women or was it women and men? Are they all midlife folks? And what were you thinking originally that you were going to be offering them?
Originally, I was just going to focus on women because I know them best. When I built the brand, I purposefully never made it one way or the other. I always wanted to leave that door open for myself. And just to say, I had this hunch, but it also was backed up by research, just that there was white space in the market. and that, if you take the US, for example, people over 50 hold 75% of the wealth, and yet 10% of advertising is focused on them. So that seemed like a business opportunity as well. But it was originally going to be women, and it was going to be how we kind of navigate this period of our lives. And that has multitudes. So that's everything from how you're going to live. Are you going to downsize? That's career standpoint. Are you going to take another career? Are you going to maybe go back to learning something? Are you going to, give of yourself? I mean, one thing I can universally say is people are generally looking for more meaning at this stage of their life. And just every issue. And then I actually just wanted there to be some sort of media property that was written from the standpoint of people that know some shit. I don't begrudge them this, but most of our media, most of the content we consume is squarely directed and written for and by millennials and Gen Z. And I get it. They're big cohorts, and we never shade any other generations, but there's just a different way that we write at the Verse that presumes a sort of shared wisdom at this point. So but I thought it was going to be for women. And this excellent guy, Philip, told me to look at my MailChimp analytics. So our signature property is a newsletter that comes out every other week. And our hope is to expand on other things. But for now, it's the newsletter. And when I looked at MailChimp, 40% of our readers that were clicking through and reading, were men. Largely because I had ported a lot of my former, network into our mailing list, but they were actually reading it. And, men have this very same issue, right? And they're maybe going to have it a little bit worse, and not to overgeneralize, but their socialization has been very grounded in their career as identity, whereas women, tend to be, if they're a mother, they kind of lead with that. They are used to having more multitudes to them in their socialization. And so, really, if we're feeling lost, I definitely thought the men in our lives were going to be feeling lost as well. And it's just really interesting.
So full disclosure for, what Stephanie started off her last answer mentioning my name, and I worked with Stephanie to develop the Verse Media brand from the ground up. But I don't want people to hear about it from my perspective. I'd love to hear from you when you thought, okay, hey, I'm this senior executive coming out of the private equity world. I'm going to start a lifestyle or a life stage pivot brand.
Yeah.
What did you think? What did you think? Oh, what do I have to do? What do I do first? Like, how do I go about this? Like, how do you even start? I mean, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because a lot of the people who are listening do this for people. They develop brands for people. Yeah. So I'd love people to hear from your perspective where you were in your head and what you were thinking I needed to do first.
Well, I had a really rough concept of it. And I sort of, I think I knew that I wanted a newsletter to be part of it. Newsletters are something I enjoy. And, there's an excellent book called Do Send or Open It, but it's, about newsletters and their efficacy, that actually people read them a whole lot more. And so I kind of knew that at the jump. But I think for me, I'm a highly visual person, and that makes things real for me. So I think for me, some of the initial part, I thought if I build something cool, they'll come, right? That it doesn't matter if it's centered on age or any gender or anything. It's got to be cool, and it's got to be something that I would want to engage with. And, you and I have shared several people who are decidedly uncool in their offerings for this age. And I think that's just a real miss, because I wanted people to say, we say at the Verse, it's only halftime, right? I'm a big sports fan, and I really feel that way. And we wanted people to kind of have a little bit of that swagger, like, it's only halftime, baby. Like, I'm going to be out there and I'm going to be doing stuff and it's going to be cool. So that was really important for me. But I do think that in developing it, probably one of the most essential things we did was just at the jump to kind of lay out some loose concepts of what it could be, what the offerings could be, what the audience would look like, and where we were trying to go. And then we did some mapping of competition, really, to find the white space. And actually, we did that maybe in 2017 or 2018, and it's still held up. And we are, exploring the white space that we sort of discovered, even though, none of these markets stays steady. So I think that was really grounding. But from there, just me personally, how I operate, I wanted something that I could see and feel. And so I think then we quickly moved on to the name and kind of colors and what the properties would be and what we'd want people to say about us. And then the naming process was great. I would say, if any of the people listening are getting involved in naming, if you are putting forward names that are where the person can't get URLs, and you haven't really done any discovery about it being in light use, and you haven't kind of thought about it and thought about how it can be perceived. There's really funny SNL skit with Nicolas Cage where they're trying to think of a name for their child, and you guys can just Google it. But they keep thinking of every name. Then people are going to nickname them this, but people don't think about that. And certainly when I saw our companies that we were invested in go through rebrands, I mean, one of them wasted a year because they couldn't get the URL for the name they picked, and they had to go right back into the naming process. So first and foremost, the name, I think you remember, I was struck by it right away. I loved all the different iterations. And I think people should think about giving names that have a lot of places to go. So there was the idea of a continuation, that we write verses and verses are continuing. There's the idea in music that the verse is where you learn something new, right? Whereas the chorus is repeated. There was the idea of the universe, and that we were kind of pioneers and exploring this whole different thing. So I think people should really think about how a name can play across the board and how it can be hit in a bunch of different places, because fast forward, we've been able to capitalize on a lot of the wordplay that came from all those different iterations. So that was hugely important to get a name. And I remember we really quickly got the URLs. We didn't quite get the exact URL, but it was fine. It was absolutely fine. And then I think we went to logo and color, and that took us kind of meeting in person to turn one word on its head and realize that was what we needed. But the other thing, I think you really have to fight a lot of sameness out there. I didn't want the verse to feel like anything else. And, if you go to our site, www.theversemedia.com, you can see everything from our photography, our illustration is pretty different. But right away, I didn't want it to look like anything else. We landed on the colors pretty quickly. I wanted something that was joyful and a little bit maximalist. And again, we're still working off those same colors and design guide and photography direction, et cetera. So it's definitely lasted the test of time. But I think people are thinking, we're getting so much sameness because everything is on Instagram and the internet, and because of great services like Squarespace and everything that have a lot of template design. And that is really nice and it makes things cheaper and useful. But I think people are thinking too much of logos only being type. And we really wanted to have a visual element. And if you think about it, a visual element's even more primed for the digital world, that you're going to know that mark from afar. And where that little mark came from was actually playing with kind of sportswear of the 70s and 80s. Think about Ales, Adidas, these things that have a mark. And so that was something we wanted to highlight. But I would also, speak to the designers that are listening or watching, really don't just go for type these days. Try to come up with a visual element, because again, there's a lot of play that you can do in that. And, to me, the true test is, does your logo look good in black or white? And ours really does. I love it in its colorful glory, but it really does look good in black and white. And again, it's just been high use because of that, where sometimes we can use the mark, sometimes we're just using, the type. But I think about a digital world where, almost if you think about an app or something, it's like, can you spot it from a mile away? And to me, that advocates for putting a visual element into it.
And I would encourage people to go look at the Verse's website and even Stephanie's feed on LinkedIn. She's done an amazing job in incorporating visual elements into her photography, and she tries to do original photography when at all possible. But she's developed a stylized visual kind of overlay of illustration, which is really, really unique and very striking. And I think Stephanie's point is really well taken in the fact that there is so much boring stock photography and so much really boring stock illustration these days that everything is really starting to look the same. And that's where I think that the Verse has really exceeded in establishing a visual impact, which is very unique and very recognizable. And as people know, I'm always beating the recognized, remembered, and revered kind of drum. And I think you can totally recognize your brand when you come across it. So congratulations on that. And I know that, I'm not the one who developed the illustration style. That was kind of done after we'd finished our branding. But that was really great.
Well, one of the products, though, we did produce was sort of this brand guide that anyone that I'm starting to work with, that I pass it off to them, and they really get the joke right away. And I think that has helped me get such great and original stuff. I would also say the other issue with stock, and especially for the audience I'm pointing at, if you think about it, these days we want to be extra helpful and extra thoughtful about our stock photography, because we really want to make sure that we're presenting diversity. But plenty of stock photography companies have gotten onto that, and I feel like have upped their stores of people of color and just a lot of diversity, except for age. If you look for someone that is 50s, you are going to get a picture of someone, a young person helping someone in a nursing home with their iPad, or it is really, really appalling. And, to the point where I haven't really had a choice about original photography. And sometimes I don't really have a choice about, I would love to show more people than I actually show in some of our photographs, because it is just absent. I mean, I've thought about, is another business versus stock that we start building a store of photography, because it's really, really bad. I mean, I'm 52, knocking on, in 1 month, I'll be 53. This is what it looks like. I mean, I haven't done anything special to myself, and, I'm kind of lucky. I don't, I wish I had beautiful silver gray hair, but I actually don't. My hair is very fine, and my mom doesn't even at age 80. So, but there just isn't this, good picture of, sorry, there isn't a good picture of what this looks like.
So let's back up just a little bit. So you got the idea for the verse, and we developed the brand identity and all that sort of stuff. How, when you had that idea, you thought, okay, this makes sense to me. How did you, authenticate or reconfirm the stickiness of that idea with who your intended target was going to be? How did you do that?
Well, I did have you do a little light research. I'm a big fan of perception audits, and people really they get very into surveys and very broad research. But even when I was running ABS's brand, I would do perception audits, and I think those are the most revealing. Like, can the people closest, and by the way, it's about perceptions. I'm not trying to get, statistical data, right? I'm trying to get perceptions. And so I used to do those a ton, or have someone do them. And I found, even if you just had 30 people around you, if they couldn't articulate your strengths, I mean, the stronger perceptions would bubble to the top, right? So you'd learn a lot from that. And by the way, when I was presenting it to my partners, it's easy to argue with statistical data and numbers. It's really hard when you put a sentence in front of them and it's like, well, someone said that, right? That's how they feel. So I think we took a similar approach in that you conducted interviews with, a group of my friends and acquaintances that are all around this age. And I think we gleaned some important insights from that. And the number one, which, is not surprising because this is how I am, but the number one is there are challenges at this age, right? There are several challenges, but the people that like me or that I'm trying to reach don't see them as problems. They think of problems as something you solve, not as something that daunts you or so, kind of a lot of the rhetoric, again, at this age, especially for women, is like, oh, you're invisible and you're this. And it really helped us to nail, like, nobody's feeling this way, and they don't. Yes, they have questions and challenges that are coming with this age, but they see those as things to take action on. And so that has flowed through, right? Dive into any one of our articles, and it's about taking action. It's not about, ruminating on a problem and, kind of being overwhelmed by it. I mean, and that's not to say, like, yes, of course we have overwhelm, and of course there are things that suck, and of course ageism is rampant, right? But I think it's particular of Gen Xers that part of the benefit about being latchkey kids was we had to figure stuff out. And so I think that's our orientation for a lot of us is, okay, like, I see the problem, and like, tell me how I can figure it out. So we really try not to write something and leave people without action. But again, that flowed straight through from kind of that original research, which was kind of perception oddity. But I mean, you're never going to know everything. You just got to be pointed in a direction. And my thought is, if I can't convince like the 25, at the time it was women, it'd be interesting to actually do again now that we've kind of opened it all up. But, if I can't convince the 25 women, that this is a good idea or this is important, or take their feedback about what they're really looking for, then, what am I doing? And so I think people get way too caught up in doing, look, if you have a consumer product, you can go right down to the shelf with that, right? And you can see how many, we're kind of awash in data right now, and we're sort of lacking knowledge and insight. And so I think people get too precious about, oh, and I'm sure this is true for a lot of people that, are watching this. And, especially if you're working in an agency, client, I want to see data. I want to see data. And, sometimes that's just not that helpful, right? Sometimes intent is really helpful. Sometimes perception is really helpful, and data can't help you with that. And I always found, again, because I was in a field where it's really hard to do that, it's not a consumer product, whether someone's doing a deal with you or not. I always found the perceptions, what someone said, you just can't argue with that, right? So I think, especially when you're starting something, you're looking to get oriented, you're looking to get pointed in a direction. But, for as much as I'm an ENTJ, a Capricorn, a type A person, I think you just got to leave your mind open and be prepared to hear what you're going to hear. But I don't know that you have to have reams of data to get the point.
You had developed your brand, you'd validated your idea, and then how did you bring yourself out to the world? What was your coming out party? What was the first thing you did in terms of developing content or engaging your audience? What did you do?
Well, we did a little tease of doing a landing page and sending that out to our contact list and getting on social and, just kind of doing a pretty nine and, kind of getting people intrigued. But the first thing we did was have an event, and it was actually oversold. It was great, but I mean, mostly my friends and contacts, but we'll take it. But the idea of the in-person event, it was in DC, 20. The idea was really to just expose people to the type of content that they maybe, were going to get from us. And our first newsletter had gone out that morning. And it was really great. And it was great for people to, we had lots of nice little touches and everything. And then the very next thing that I was going to do, besides launching more of a real website and starting on the path of delivering a newsletter every other week, was I was supposed to speak at South by Southwest in March of 2020. I was going to be on a panel called 50 is the New 30 with some other people that were building businesses for Gen X. And actually the organizers, because they can see on South by Southwest who's saved what sessions in their potential schedule, had already had so much interest in the panel that they basically had come back and asked us if we could do a second run of it. So
Wow.
I was super excited about that, although, I really, to be clear, I hadn't done anything yet that was worthy of South by Southwest. So, but no matter. But anyway, like the week before South by Southwest, I was like, what? Like, are we really going to be canceling things? Yep, really are. So
COVID hit you.
COVID hit me. And, I think that's been really great because it sort of, forced me to be very agile about what we were talking about, because, we couldn't just go on to like, what's your next career going to be, and, what color's your parachute, when people are kind of in survival mode. And so the thing that I sort of said at that time was, let's just be helpful. Like, can we be helpful? Can we help inch people forward a little bit more? And, I'm just writing sort of our New Year issue right now. And finally, after, we're coming up on 2 years, like it was just the anniversary of when they had the first case in Wuhan. Finally, I think I'm saying to myself, and, I kind of always take the approach, we're not an aspirational brand, right? I'm right along with you. I'm maybe 5 feet in front of you, and I can tell you to watch out for that rock, but I'm on the hike with you, and I'm just telling you what I've learned. And so that's kind of the point of view from which I write. But I am saying to myself, as much to everybody else, that it is time, even if a little bit premature, to make the move from pandemic to endemic. This is part of our lives. And for as many pronouncements we've all been making about the new normal, we haven't really settled into this being normal. And there is this sort of suspended animation quality to our lives right now. My friend calls it, we're living as soon as lives, right? Like, as soon as this, as soon as that. This is how life, I think, is going to be, more or less, right? I think that's why you haven't seen, maybe just pure exhaustion, you haven't seen people lose their minds over, except for trying to pronounce Omicron. But you haven't seen people lose their minds, partially because we're still learning what it means, but I think partially because I think for most of us, if we've gotten vaxxed, we've gotten boosted, I mean, there's not a lot else that we can control. And so I'm reminding myself to why I started the verse, and really to go back to that place. And it's not like we've been doing all, COVID all the time. You can't be divorced from the times in which you're living. But at the same time, I think, I think it's been good, and it's tested me at times in terms of, having the energy to push forward. But I think it's time to actually make that move for all of us. And we're probably in a lot better place to make it, because I think we all have a better sense of what's really meaningful. And that's something that you're assessing at this stage of life anyway, right? And I think that has all given us, everybody, not just our generation, it's given everybody the chance to think about that. And, I think that's why you're seeing the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle. But I think, for a lot of people, actually, COVID hastened them into retirement.
Yeah. So
some by not their choosing, some by their choosing. So.
And because you have your finger on the pulse of this cohort, that COVID obviously brought into, very widespread effect, this reconsideration of what's important in life, or this reevaluation of what your professional life is as it relates to your personal being. Have you seen, as a result of this Great Resignation and COVID and this kind of incredible, kind of rock that's been put in front of all of us, have you seen a heavier focus on this pivot that the verse addresses?
Yeah, I have. I mean, or at the very least, a realization that, and I'm going to speak here to knowledge workers, because that's who I know and am kind of in touch with. I think we could get into a whole bunch of different issues for people that are working in the service industries and other things. But just speaking for knowledge workers, I think there was kind of already a feeling, and it was something I was feeling. It's pretty unfulfilling in a way. I think that we spoke at the Verse, and it's honestly our top performing article this year. We spoke to Anthony Klotz, who is the person that coined the Great Resignation, and he was saying this, that companies are really missing the boat on purpose-driven leadership to remind you why what you're doing actually matters in the world. And that's probably been made worse during COVID, because everyone feels like they've been firefighting. But there is kind of this, like,
what's the meaning of life, the meaning of work?
Yeah, what's the meaning of work? Is my life too centered on it? Has my life been too centered on it? I mean, I would just speak for myself that I couldn't have predicted this, but I was kind of ahead of the curve, because I was kind of feeling like, what else, is there anything left? Like, and then kind of getting away from it. And I have told other friends who have left their careers in the same industry, it's going to take you 2 years really to wash that out of your system. The whole being on all the time and being on your email, and email is like such a scourge, and it's just awful. But this whole feeling of like, oh, I've got to return this, I've got to return this email at 10 o'clock at night. And it's like, we're not curing cancer, right? It was just a business, and it was important to me. And I don't devalue what all my former partners do, but I mean, it wasn't that important. And so I try to say to people that are still in it, like, when you finish, your legacy is not going to be that you returned an email at 10 o'clock at night, right? Like, that's ridiculous. But it's honestly taken me that long. It was almost like I had an appendage missing, that I was like, wait, something must be wrong. Because I was so used to that kind of adrenaline filled, kind of, workism. And there's a lot of discussion about this right now, because I think people are wondering what's the meaning of what they do and how does it contribute, and are there other things, are there other ways of contributing, right? I was just listening to a woman who has been really great on this topic, but she was saying that a lot of people are finding that without the commute and without the distractions of their office, this is setting aside people that I really feel for with childcare issues and other things. But a lot of people are finding that their work can be done, their deliverables can be done in 25 hours, not 40 hours, right? And without a commute. And, there's this real tension, because I think the workplaces are saying, well, you got to come back to the office. And, they really have very little data to say what happens in the office. And again, they're missing the moment to articulate to people what, and make a solid case with facts, what they believe uniquely happens in the office, and kind of make the office for that. And, so many people are having, and this is not my thought, this is what some of the people are studying. They're having the worst of both worlds. They're being called into their office to be on Zooms. So they're having the worst of the office and the worst of work from home, right? And I think people don't really know what hybrid work or work from home looks like, because this has been work from home under duress, right? And circumstances, again, going back to people that have child issues and like, so yeah, I think people in my cohort in particular, to land the plane here, are really taking a second look at what they're doing and what's meaningful about it.
So you got out of the gate with a live event and email and your website. And so what have you been doing in terms of growing your brand, and what's worked for you, and what have you had to pivot in the verse?
I will say, and this was as a result of a session that you had set up, I would say LinkedIn is really working. Instagram is visual, and so I'm highly attracted to it. And we do get a lot of traffic from Instagram, so I don't want to discount that. But it is a very hard place to break in. I mean, of course, they've made some changes recently where you can link whether you have 10,000 followers or not. But, it's just kind of a cheesy place of like, you can really do a lot of jerky things to get a ton of followers, but they won't be any of the people that you want to follow you. And we have a high open rate, and I want to maintain that to a degree. And so I think LinkedIn is like the, old shampoo commercial, like you have two friends and they tell two friends. And, it's much easier to kind of target the people that are like the people that already read the verse. And it's also been a great place for me to be able to connect with people like Anthony Klotz and like ask him if he'll do an interview with us. So, I mean, on that front, we're punching way above our weight. And so I think redoing my own personal LinkedIn profile as well as redoing our company one to really optimize for LinkedIn and recently have, turned on creator mode. That's really been working for us. But, so social is vexing, right? Because you got to play the game. But, so that has been working. And I think, we have done a couple virtual things that I think, have been well received. And so I'm trying to think about, I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I only want to do those in the way that, are really good. And, I probably overly concentrate. Am I delivering value? And I probably overdo it. But, we did a session in June of 2020 that's actually using military planning that I got from my husband. I heard my husband on a call, and it was really about planning backwards, right? That when you have high uncertainty, you need to plan backwards. And so the best example I can give of that is when we did D-Day in World War II, because of waves and tides and weather, there were probably only 3 to 4 days that they could have executed that landing. And so they basically had to pick a day and an intention and work back from that. And then it's about doing only what you can do that will help you be prepared for that outcome. And so the things that they couldn't control were the element of surprise and weather. And in fact, they had to put it off by a day. But it was like, it's making sure that, you had all the boats there, that you had all the support, that you had everything in place to execute on it. And I think that was a really helpful session. And I did it with our mutual friend and my executive coach, Catherine Carruthers. But that was a really great session because I think, and I'm thinking about reviving that because I think it restored some agency to people when we've been in this period of feeling like things are happening to us. And so it's like, yeah, maybe no one's going to be hiring, but that doesn't mean your LinkedIn profile can't be up to date, or you can't have done, a great resume, or you can't have, gotten on the phone with some connections of yours. So it's really saying, yeah, you can't control that ultimate outcome, but you can do some things. So I think that was a really well-received session. And I think also what worked about it, again, going back to action, is we had people fill out stuff while we were on the call. We gave them some breaks to write. And so they were kind of in a position to actually turn around. I always call it Do It Monday. That's a feature we have, but I always call it Do It Monday items. What could you turn around for zero cost and execute on? And I feel like the mark of good content or good sessions like that is to give people something that they can actually go act on. Because, we all, sometimes we listen to something and it's interesting, but sort of walking out of there with a paper that was sort of filled out and gave them some guide was helpful. So I'm thinking of more things like that because I think people are really short of time, especially, we're kind of sandwiched on our responsibilities. Many people have older children that they're still, and some younger children that they're still shepherding along. And then they might be on the other side of that, caretaking for an older parent. So people are squeezed on time. So, how can we give them these bites of things that propel them forward, give them some momentum towards doing this? Because what I always tell people about finding their next verse or whatever they want to do next, and when I say find their next verse, that could be volunteering, that could be pursuing a lifelong dream, that could be another career. It doesn't have to be any one of those, but what I always tell people, people always say, I'll think about it like when I'm done doing what I'm doing right now, or when I carve out some time. I always tell them, like, you're not that person. Like, you're not Thoreau, you're not going to the woods, you're not going to figure it out. Like, none of us are those people, right? So you need like a little boost and some accountability, and you need a way to turn it into action, and you need to just point yourself in a direction. And so I can sit here and say, 2 years in on the verse, do I know if it's the thing or will be the thing or what it's going to be when it grows up? I don't, but I know it's on the way to the thing, right? And that's what keeps me going every day. And so, when people point themselves in a direction, you don't have to be right. You got to take a step, you got to move, and, you'll figure it out.
So it has been amazing hearing about the development of the verse from the beginning to the end and what it's going to become in the future. And so I have a question I ask all my guests at the end of the podcast. Do you have a mantra or some sort of personal manifesto that you try to live your life by?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I might not get it to the word, but it's a JFK quote, which is, things don't happen, things are made to happen. And I very much believe that. And that doesn't mean I'm a Pollyanna and I don't think that things can happen. But, anything that I've achieved, I've made it happen. And so I think always reminding myself, and again, you see it all over the verse, that we can take action. We have agency. We have agency even in the times that it feels like a ton of things are being visited upon us. We always have choices we can make. We always have actions we can take. And, that's why I love reading something like, about Nelson Mandela, right? Or these people, or, there was a great book a couple of years ago by, it was for a long time, wrongly accused. And he made a whole decision that he was going to make an interior world for himself, that he was going to read, that he was going to do all these things. And so I just really live by that no matter what you think has come your way, and that's not saying bad things don't happen to people, but anything you want to happen, you got to make it happen.
You dropped out when you were talking about that last book. Who was the author and what was the name of the book?
Oh, I'm sorry. I read a book by a gentleman, and I'm not going to recall the name, but he was on death row for 50 years. It was like an Oprah's favorite book. And he was wrongly accused, and he is since free. But he really decided at a certain point that he wasn't going to live every day thinking about this thing that had happened to him. He was going to have an interior life. He was going to read. He was going to, he made up sweet little fantasies in his head, like about that he was married to Halle Berry or something. And, he just decided that these four walls couldn't hold him. And he decided also to have forgiveness in his heart. And I would argue that if he is enjoying his freedom now, it's because he made those decisions. So
that's incredible. So, Stephanie, where can people get in touch with you? Where do you want people to engage with the verse?
They can follow me, Stephanie Carter, on LinkedIn, or they can follow the Verse Media on LinkedIn. Ideally, they do both. On Instagram, we're at the Verse Media. And just please visit our website, especially to see Philip's beautiful work, www.theversemedia.com. Sign up for our newsletter. We really made a decision early on to never engage in any intergenerational shade. So I don't care how old you are, you might find something useful. We definitely have our fair share of younger newsletter readers, and we just try to share the wisdom. So
Awesome. Thanks, Stephanie Carter, for joining us and sharing the journey of the Verse Media. We hope you'll come back and talk to us again soon.
Absolutely.